Hello and welcome to the Nexus. Today's show, Theresa May's Brexit Nightmare. Well, she always wanted to be Prime Minister, but boy, did she pick a bad time. Well, this week she was hit with the Boris Bombshell, her Foreign Secretary resigning. Strange thing is, she looks almost relieved. Meanwhile, rebel MPs are plotting her downfall, but are there enough of them to push her out? What do the Europeans make of all this? They're said to be laughing at the British. And exiting in style, England's football team give their government a lesson on how to handle themselves on the world stage. All that and more coming up right now, here in the Nexus. Hello, I'm Matthew Moore, and today in the Nexus, an ambush, a backstabbing and a clock ticking. It's British politics in the Brexit era. It's all a bit shady, but we have three guests to shed some light on this, including the referendum expert, Matthew Qvortrup, who thinks a second referendum might be a good idea. We also have the right-wing journalist, Andre Walker, who says it's time that Britain got tough with the EU. And finally, Ian Moore, a British satirist, or should we say French now, who lives in France and was so worried about Brexit, he changed his nationality. But first, it's time for our little horror movie. So switch off the lights, pull up the blankets, and let's watch Mrs. May's Brexit Nightmare.
Let June the 23rd go down in our history as our Independence Day.
After the people in Great Britain voted to exit the European Union, Prime Minister David Cameron has now announced his resignation.
I think the country requires fresh leadership.
Brexit means Brexit means Brexit means Brexit.
No negotiations without notification.
We will not take decisions until we are ready. We will not reveal our hand prematurely.
Time is running out and the clock is ticking.
It is now Brexit at any cost.
No deal for Britain is better than a bad deal for Britain.
No deal is in fact a bad deal. It is the worst of all deals.
So there can be no going back. The point of no return was passed on June 23rd last year.
As soon as the UK is ready to come to the table, we shall start negotiating. The clock is ticking.
Were voters warned about a £40 billion bill when they voted leave?
No. You've got the British government saying all along, we cannot tell you what the border is going to look like until we get a trade deal, and the EU saying we need to know what the border looks like before we can talk about a trade deal.
What happens to the more than 3 million EU citizens who currently live in the UK has been one of the thorniest issues in the ongoing Brexit talks.
I'm concerned. Time passes quickly.
16 months on from the referendum, no real progress has been made.
19 months after the EU referendum, and the Prime Minister has not a shred of economic analysis on the impact of leaving the single market.
We've been talking to a brick wall.
Just at the moment when Britain needs a strong negotiating team, we have a cabinet at each other's throats.
Well, late last night, as you said, the Brexit Secretary David Davis handed in his notice.
On another shake-up in the British government, Foreign Secretary Boris Johnson resigning today.
Well, there you go, Mrs. May's Brexit Nightmare. Let's go straight to Andre Walker. Andre, one of the greatest chapters of this whole saga is the Boris Bombshell. You know, she's trying to portray herself as now stronger because he's outside and she's got a loyalist in his place. Do you think she's stronger or weaker?
No, I think she's most definitely weaker. I think the big issue that she's got now is that the country is really keen to get on with Brexit, whether that's because they voted leave or voted remain. They're very keen for things to be organised properly. And I think having a balance within the cabinet of both people who voted for leave and voted remain was a good thing. But, you know, that we are where we are. And I think Theresa May once described herself as strong and stable. Increasingly, she appears to be weak and stable. So maybe that's something she can continue on with.
Well, let me ask Professor Qvortrup, why didn't Theresa May move to sack Boris Johnson earlier? He's been a persistent pain in the neck. He's been embarrassing at times. She knew his position. Why did she let him resign? Why not sack him and look strong?
she wasn't in a position where she could sack him before, because if she'd sacked him a few weeks ago, there probably would have been the famous signatures to the 1922 committee. By waiting, she has given herself enough time not to have a coup. There's only about less than 2 weeks really till the end of the parliamentary year, and that's probably not enough time. So if she'd moved beforehand, it would have been much easier for them to gather the signatures. So I think it's in a way, while I do agree that she is in a weak position, she's been that throughout, I think it's tactically shrewd to wait until this moment in time to have the checkers disagreement.
Andre, I want to come back to you. I know that you're on the phone with MPs frequently, and particularly the Tory MPs, I guess. Are there enough rebels now? Are they gathering steam to push her out, to mount a leadership challenge?
I think if you define rebels as people who are going to attack her Brexit policy, yes, there are a lot of rebels. Are there enough people to get that critical 48 Conservative MPs to call for a leadership election? No, I don't believe there are, or at least they're not keen to do it at the moment. And what I would say is another point that's in Mrs May's favour. Genuinely, if it went to a ballot of Conservative MPs to no confidence her, I believe that she'd win. So firstly, there won't be the 48 to put the letters into no confidence her, and secondly, there won't be a majority to get rid of her completely. So in that sense, there aren't enough rebels now.
Let's take a quick look at what the bookies are saying. Now, the odds are, they say, around about 6 to 5. So about even odds there that there will be a Tory leadership challenge. And if we look at who's the favourites, let's take a look at the league table there of the Tories who could take over. Boris Johnson and Michael Gove, his pal, both at 6 to 1. Sajid Javid is second favourite there, and the leading favourite contender to take over, should there be a leadership challenge, is Jacob Rees-Mogg. Now, for our international viewers who don't know much about him, he resembles a little bit this character here from John Cleese's old days in the 70s, man wearing a bowler hat. Speaks very well, clipped upper-class English accent. You thought perhaps they'd all disappeared, but they still exist. Have a listen.
And basically, the Chequers deal isn't Brexit, and is not delivering on the promises that the government had given previously about how Brexit would mean Brexit and so on. If it's the Chequers deal, Brexit doesn't mean Brexit.
Ian Moore, if I can come to you, you're dressed as well as he is, if anybody, you know. But the thing is, he's Eton and Oxford, a bit like what we have here in Boris Johnson and the others, David Cameron and so on. What do you think of all this?
I get confused about who is a rebel and who isn't a rebel most of the time. Dominic Grieve was the leading rebel, and then he rebelled against his own rebellion. It's getting very confusing. If this was the film Spartacus, they'd all be standing up going, "No, he's Spartacus."
We're all going back to the posh days, though, aren't we, of being ruled by the upper classes?
Well, we have been for some time. There's David Cameron and George Osborne's, all the Bullingdon Club, where they used to go out trashing restaurants, and now they trash the country.
Oh, sharp. Well, let's look more closely now at the so-called Chequers agreement which led to this crisis. Some ministers are saying that the British Prime Minister ambushed them. Well, she summoned her entire cabinet to her official country retreat called Chequers on Friday, and ministers had to hand in their mobile phones, so we're told, so they couldn't leak any information to the press, people like Andre Walker. Now, we have just a couple of images, still images from the meeting, which lasted a tense 12 hours. There he is, Boris Johnson right in the middle there, wearing the white shirt, and the other, shall we say, resigner in the white shirt. Just to the left there is David Davis. There's Mrs May there, standing up and commanding them. She managed to get them all to back her Brexit plan, which included a common rule book governing trade in goods, a combined customs territory that encompasses the borders between the UK and the EU, and a continuing, albeit diminished, role for the European Court of Justice. Now, the Cabinet agreed to the plan, but 2 days later, Britain's Brexit Minister, David Davis, there he is, resigned, complaining it was not a real Brexit. Let me come back to you, Andre. What do you mean it wasn't a real Brexit?
Well, I was speaking to David Davis, and I think the point that he was making was that his ministers and himself were really not part of this deal at all. It was effectively personally negotiated by the Prime Minister's Europe advisor with Michel Barnier, who's the European Union's chief negotiator. And so effectively, when the Brexit department, and specifically David Davis, got to Chequers, of course, he was presented with a deal that he had no sight of and no knowledge of. And I think that's why he had to leave. So I think there is one important thing to bear in mind. This, the Chequers deal is effectively a series of headlines for us in the public. The full details of it are going to be published later. And so I think when the details come out, we're going to know a bit more about things like, what is the power of the European Court of Justice? Is it enough for me to say that this isn't Brexit at all? Or is it going to be fairly light and nobody cares?
Oh, well, fair enough. But we have got some details. I appreciate we're waiting for the full white paper. But here's Theresa May's defence of the Chequers agreement.
Mr. Speaker, this is the right Brexit, leaving the European Union on the 29th of March 2019. A complete end to free movement, taking back control of our borders. An end to the jurisdiction of the CJEU in the UK, restoring the supremacy of British courts. No more sending vast sums of money each year to the EU. Instead, a Brexit dividend to spend on domestic priorities like our long-term plan for the NHS. Flexibility on services where the UK is world leading. No hard border between Northern Ireland and Ireland or between Northern Ireland and Great Britain. A parliamentary lock on all new rules and regulations. Leaving the common agricultural policy and the common fisheries policy. The freedom to strike new trade deals around the world. An independent foreign and defence policy. But not the most distant relationship possible with our neighbours and friends. A new deep and special partnership. Frictionless trade in goods, shared commitments to high standards so that together we continue to promote open and fair trade, and continued security cooperation to keep our people safe. This is the Brexit that is in our national interest. It is the Brexit that will deliver on the democratic decision of the British people. It is the right Brexit deal for Britain, and I commend this statement to the House.
Well, let's go to Ian Moore now. Ian, one of the things she mentioned was the complete end to free movement. You were a British citizen living in France. You've now just switched to being a French citizen. You were that worried?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely, I'm worried. I work in the UK and live in France, and once the ETIAS scheme comes into place in 2021, that will make me, I'd have to apply for visas constantly. Also, my family is French and English, and it was important for us to all be the same nationality because of hostile environments and the way people are treated. There was nothing in that statement about British people living on the continent, and she's in for a bit of a shock when 500,000 people return from southern Spain with a vitamin B deficiency.
OK, thank you, Ian. The problem is, perhaps, around this entire thing is that the question that was posed to the British people perhaps didn't encompass enough detail. Let's take a look at the referendum. There we go. Should the United Kingdom remain a member of the European Union or leave the European Union? Now, Professor Qvortrup, that seems, on the face of it, quite a simple question. The British people answered it. They said they want to leave. Problem is, the devil is in the detail. When you get a Brexit, what kind of Brexit is just as important as the principle of leaving?
That's true, but I think in some ways people can sort of take cues and say, well, it's the overall principle. I think if in Northern Ireland, I remember they had a referendum on the peace agreement, which was, do you agree with Command Paper 331? And of course, that's a little bit sort of more esoteric, if you like. But I think the problem with the referendum campaign was that there was a certain Boris Johnson who says, if you vote leave, then there'll be another referendum, because then we will have to iron out a deal. The same Boris Johnson also mentioned the possibility of getting a Norway-style arrangement, but we still wouldn't have to pay to the European Union. That was denied by David Cameron, who said there could never be another referendum, and many of the Remainers said that would be terrible. And now we have completely flipped that around. And those people who want to leave say there can be no talk about a referendum, and they say people have voted for a hard Brexit, which was the very thing they denied during the campaign. So I think for that reason, it would be democratic and reasonable if people are then asked afterwards, after there is a deal, say, do you still agree with this?
Andre, just quickly, you wouldn't want to see a second referendum?
No, and I think the difficulty that we're in here is you've got to be clear on what the purpose of the first referendum was. The purpose of the first referendum was to confirm that the British people are secretly pro-European. So the idea that would be that we would all vote to remain in the European Union to finally settle this problem. The reason why now people want a second referendum is because they want us to keep re-voting and re-voting and re-voting until we come to the correct results, because we didn't get it right last time.
Fair enough, Andre, but let me bring up a Brexit clock here. Look at this. We're running out of time for a deal. 260 days, around 260 days. Now, isn't that a reason to just let the government get on with it at some point? You can't get exactly what you want as a Brexiteer.
I think that's right. I think the fundamental issue here is, look, what we've got is we've got the European government in Brussels effectively trying to stymie this Brexit negotiation. And then you've got effectively what is a fifth column within Parliament, particularly in the House of Lords, of people who are absolute European loyalists who are trying to stop it. And effectively the conclusion that we're supposed to come to as the British people is, oh, this is all so difficult, let's not bother. But I don't think that's going to happen. I think most people are saying, forget the deal, forget all of it, let's just leave tomorrow.
OK, thank you, Andre. Let's circle back to the blonde bombshell, Boris Johnson, a.k.a. Bojo. Once arguably Britain's most famous politician, he was also tipped to be the next Prime Minister once upon a time. But now he's in the political wilderness. Or is he plotting a comeback?
Alexander Boris de Pfeffel Johnson.
Say again?
It's fine, just call me Boris. I'm very proud to be British, very British indeed, but I do have a mixture of Turkish, German, French and Russian ancestry. People like to say that I came from great wealth, educated at Britain's most elite school, Eton, and also at Oxford University. And as for my record in politics, I've made it to the very top of the ladder. Mayor of London, Foreign Secretary, and a leading figure in the victorious pro-Brexit campaign.
I will be advocating vote leave, or whatever the team is called.
A lot of people like to point out my gaffes and mistakes, but I say they make me human. I mean, who except me and perhaps James Bond would go on a zip wire at the London Olympics? OK, there I was, dangling above the crowd, but I'm a crowd pleaser. And everyone knows I'm a natural born athlete. In Japan, I showed what a true British rugby player could do, and if it wasn't for that pesky child, I would have scored. Off the pitch, I'm just as brutal. Just ask the European Union.
The sums that I have seen that they propose to demand from this country seem to me to be extortionate, and I think to go whistle is an entirely appropriate expression.
Shame the other side doesn't have a sense of humour.
I'm not hearing any whistling, just the clock ticking.
But I do confess, occasionally the joke goes too far.
Turning to the next 2-5, the only thing they've got to do is clear the dead bodies.
So just to be clear, I was joking when I said the Libyan city Sirte could rival Dubai once the bodies were cleared away. But hands up, I did make a big mistake in 2017 when I said a British Iranian woman had been teaching journalism. Apologies to Nazanin Zaghari-Ratcliffe. She denied it when she was jailed for 5 years in 2016. The Iranians did make clear that my remarks could have doubled her sentence.
I accept that my remarks could have been clearer.
So the question on everybody's lips should be, what's next for Boris Johnson? Where is this psychopath taking me? I don't know, but I have a feeling it could be to number 10.
Back to Ian Moore, the French satirist. Ian, tu veux... no, I'll speak in English. This is what you want as a satirist, isn't it? You want this man in charge.
To a certain extent, yes, but this has gone beyond a joke now. He's a very dangerous kind of buffoon. He has made so many mistakes and so many gaffes, and he is regarded from abroad as a very sort of dangerous individual. He really is, and it's all about naked ambition. I mean, if we are to have no deal and everything goes belly up in the UK, you could just plug him into the national grid. We'd have plenty of electricity for ages.
I don't want to see Bojo's naked ambition, but let's go to Professor Qvortrup. Professor, you were having lunch the other day with somebody who was also a wannabe Prime Minister, a certain Michael Portillo. What came out of that? You must have discussed Bojo.
Yes, and Michael Portillo said that he belonged to a club of of people who were once future prime ministers. He, of course, himself belonged to that. Michael Heseltine belonged to it. And he then finished off the sentence by saying, "I can't wait for the moment when Boris joins our club. And I don't think it'll take a long time." And I think for those of you who don't know Michael Portillo, he had ambitions to become leader, but sort of was sort of dithering a bit and didn't quite show the ambition. And I think the problem for Boris Johnson is that, like Portillo, he's had his moment, he's had his chance, and he hasn't quite had the resolve. And also the fact that he didn't resign first, he waited for somebody else to resign. You have to have a little bit of more ballsiness, a bit more I don't know if you're allowed to say that on TV, frankly, but we'll have more chutzpah, I think.
Chutzpah. Yeah, cojones. Yeah. We could probably say it in another language. Andre, keep your language clean, Andre. Do you think Bojo's missed his moment?
Oh, without a doubt. By the way, I think one of the interesting things for your viewers and people across the world is he is very proud to be Turkish, apparently, even though he doesn't look, sound or act Turkish at all. But yes, he has missed his moment. If you think back to when he was Mayor of London during the 2012 Olympics, this was a hugely popular figure. Now he's a pretty divisive figure and actually has been pretty badly discredited. One of the things that's quite interesting is when he felt obliged to resign the other day, because David Davis resigned, he then called in a photographer to take a photo of him signing the resignation letter. It's tricks like that that really kind of alienated him. So I don't see him being the Prime Minister. And I agree with the Portillo analysis, which is actually correctly, he's a former future Prime Minister.
Ian, I have to ask you, what's the problem with having a photograph of yourself signing a letter? It looks quite presidential, quite historic. Maybe that's what he was thinking.
Well, it's funny that you should say it looks presidential, because doesn't he still have an American passport? Wasn't he born in New York? If he's not going to be Prime Minister of the UK,
Andre, come in.
President of America.
Yeah, so apparently he's had to give back his US citizenship because they're after him for some tax on the UK property. And so it may well be not only is he no longer an American citizen, he might be wanted for tax evasion in America, although it's pretty unclear, it has to be said.
Okay. It's all been a bit of a shambles, I think everyone could agree. And if Theresa May wants to know how to operate on the world stage, perhaps she could look at the exit with grace that the England football team has managed. Take some tips from Gareth Southgate. Here he is talking about the power of football to unite a divided country.
They've been brilliant ambassadors for our country, and I think everybody can see that. They're proud to wear the shirt. It's great for them that they've got some enjoyable experiences now playing for England. And our country has been through some difficult moments recently in terms of its unity, and I think sport has the power to do that.
OK, Ian, would you like to see Gareth Southgate at number 10?
Yes, as a proud Frenchman, I'd like to see Gareth Southgate at number 10. It is interesting. It is, because looking on it from outside as well as inside, you've seen over the last couple of years a kind of bombastic jingoism, backstabbing, a real chaos, which the UK is just not known for. And what you've seen over the last few weeks is well-mannered, well-dressed, polite side, stiff upper lip, if you like, has returned. And there's nothing wrong with that.
I've got to tell you about the little mistake that I made. I put up yesterday the 3 lions, what I thought was English flag, but it was the Richard the Lionheart version, which of course is French. So I've decided now to leave it up for the final. So good luck to France.
Join us, Andre. Join us.
Yeah, good luck to France then. I've got the flag now. I bought it. I might as well use it.
Professor Qvortrup, when you're not being a professor, you're also keeping an eye on the English football team. They went out in the semis, but they went out with grace.
They did. We're still very sad about that, and it's I don't really want to talk about it because it's too raw, I'm afraid. But I think it is important. Also, what Gareth Southgate was saying about the team, he talked about diversity. He was actually sounding like an intelligent man. And I think it's sort of like, it's interesting that some of the FA people, and also if you look at the team, somebody's called Raheem Sterling, which is a Muslim name. I mean, it's almost like the French team. It's sort of like almost a symbol of the multicultural society that we are. And that multicultural society is also polite and well-spoken and not aggressive. I think we could learn a lot from that in politics.
One more question. We asked at the top of the show if the Europeans were laughing at us, and I know you talk about speaking languages, you've got a good command of German and somewhat Italian, you keep an eye on the media. What are they saying there?
Yes, I think people are baffled. People in Germany and in Italy and all those places aren't really sort of laughing at us and pointing fingers. We in Britain tend to be laughing at the Germans. We sort of use the only German word we know, Schadenfreude, every time things go bad there. And I think the people in Berlin or Hamburg or Nuremberg or wherever are sort of thinking, well, the Brits used to be quite efficient and they're sort of businesslike, and here there is no plan. So I think it's just complete bewilderment around Europe, and perhaps also an element of pity. A sort of this proud nation is now making a rod for its own backside.
And the same question to you, Ian, from a French perspective.
I think it's the same. I think in the UK, I think what happens a lot is that when something bad happens in Brexit, certain papers will start screaming, "Oh, the Europeans must be laughing at us." Well, it's worse. Nobody is laughing at us. They're feeling sorry for us, and that's an awful situation. I know as a stand-up comedian, if nobody's laughing and they're feeling sorry for you, things aren't going very well at all.
My goodness, Ian, you're trying to compare Britain to a comedian dying on a stage. That's awful. OK, well, Ian Moore, thank you so much for your contribution. Also, Andre Walker and Professor Matthew Qvortrup, thank you too. And thank you for watching. Don't forget, you can go through all our episodes online on the YouTube channel and join us next week for Trump Meets Putin again. See you then.